They say that in every blizzard, there is more than just cold and snow. There are memories, regrets, prayers, and sometimes presences. There are places in the world where faith lingers in the air like fog, thin, unseen, but undeniably there. Places where the line between the living and the departed is not a wall, but a veil, fluttering in the winds of mystery. This story begins in one such place. It is not a tale of horror. Though there are shadows, it is not merely a miracle story, though what happened could be nothing less. This is a story of a soul on the edge of surrender, and another, long thought gone, reaching back with a prayer in hand. Her name was Emily, a young woman walking through one of the loneliest seasons of her life. Loss had wrapped itself around her heart like frostbite. She wasn't running away exactly, but she wasn't going anywhere either. One winter evening, while trying to drive home through an unfamiliar region in the northern hills, she took a wrong turn, or maybe the road chose her. What followed was not something she could ever explain. Not to her family, not to the police, not even to herself. She would speak of an old man in the snow, silent, gentle, carrying a wooden rosary and whispering prayers in a language she didn't recognize. He led her to safety. He warmed her with soup and fire. And then, when the dawn broke, he was gone. And when she returned to thank him, there was no cabin, no footprints, no man, only a rosary in her coat pocket, and the story that changed her life forever. Some believe he was an angel. Others say he was a saint, a holy hermit who once lived in those woods. Some even believe she dreamed it all. But Emily knows what she felt. And this, what you're about to hear, is her story. Chapter 1. The Road to Nowhere. There are nights when the silence speaks louder than the wind. I should have stayed on the main road. Every logical thought in my head told me that as I turned off onto the narrower path, where the trees crept closer and the snow was falling harder than ever. But grief doesn't listen to logic. It just needs movement, any movement, to distract from the ache. I was 24, old enough to know better, young enough to think I'd be fine anyway. I was driving my mother's old sedan, still smelling faintly of her lavender perfume, trying to get to my aunt's cabin before nightfall. I didn't tell anyone I was coming. I didn't even really know why I was going. I just couldn't stay in that house anymore. Not after the funeral. So I drove, and the storm came. The snow had been falling all day. Not the light, soft kind that you watch from a window while drinking cocoa. This was the kind of snow that eats roads, that turns familiar signs into meaningless white blurs. By the time the radio fizzled into static and my phone blinked no signal, I was already too far in. I told myself I'd gone this way before, that this road connected to the highway, that I'd be okay. But the truth was, I didn't recognize any of it. I passed a crooked wooden fence, then a rusted-out mailbox with peeling numbers. Then, 10 minutes later, I passed them again. I was going in circles. Panic started as a whisper, just a little nudge in the chest. But with each passing mile, each disappearing landmark, it grew louder. "Come on," I muttered to the car. Just a little further. The wipers were struggling. The headlights barely lit the way through the whiteout. And then, as if it had been waiting for just the right moment. The engine shuddered, a low clunk, a final flicker of dashboard lights. And then, silence. "No," I whispered. I turned the key. Nothing. Again, nothing. The heater died. The windshield began to fog with my breath. No, no, no. I hit the hazard lights. They blinked once, then stopped. Just me, alone, in the middle of a snowstorm. In the woods. I sat there for a while. Just sat. The silence was oppressive, not empty, full, thick. It pressed against the car windows like something alive. I thought I saw movement in the rearview mirror, but it was just snow blowing past. Probably. Eventually, I forced myself to open the door. The wind punched me in the face. Bitter, wet, unforgiving. I stepped out. My boots sank several inches. Snow crept in under my jeans. My fingers, even in gloves, began to sting. I looked around. The road behind me was gone, swallowed by the storm. Ahead, only white, trees, darkness. My phone still had no signal. I could either stay and freeze, or move and hope. I moved. I didn't know where I was going. I just picked a direction that felt forward and walked. The snow made everything soft and strange. Each step felt heavier, each breath a little harder. At some point, I started talking to myself. Maybe to keep from panicking. Maybe just to hear a voice. Someone must live nearby. I said out loud, "There's gotta be a cabin. Or a ranger station. Something." No one answered. The trees grew taller. Their branches sagged under the weight of snow. Pine needles brushed against my hood. It felt like walking through a cathedral made of ice. And still, I walked. I don't remember how long I walked. Time was weird in that forest. Minutes stretched, or maybe I was just that tired. Then, somewhere between the numbness and the noise in my head, I felt it, that prickling on the back of my neck. The one that says, "You're not alone." I stopped, listened. The wind moved, the snow fell, and then, crunch. Not me. I spun around. Nothing. But I knew what I heard. I took a few more steps. Another crunch behind me. My heart slammed against my ribs. "Hello," I called out. Silence. I turned back around, and for the briefest second, I thought I saw something move between the trees. A shape, a figure, gone before I could focus on it. I told myself it was just the snow playing tricks, shadows and wind, but my legs didn't believe me. I walked faster. I passed a broken stump that looked like it had claw marks in it. Two black birds sat on a low branch, completely still, watching me. They didn't fly away. The forest was so quiet it felt wrong. Then, the trees opened slightly. Ahead, I saw what looked like a trail. Not a road, just a thinner path through the woods. But it was something. I hesitated, and that's when I heard it. Not a footstep, not a voice, but a sound. Click, 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 like beads tapping together, rosary beads. And then, a whisper, low, rhythmic, in Latin, ora pro nobis. Peccatoribus, nunc in hora mortis nostrae. I froze. I knew that prayer. My mom used to say it every night when I was little, even when I stopped believing. And now, here it was, in the middle of the forest. I turned slowly toward the sound, and I saw him, An old man, standing beneath a crooked pine tree. He wore a long gray cloak that blended into the snow. His face was mostly hidden by the hood, but his hand held a wooden rosary, and it moved slowly, prayerfully, through his fingers. He didn't say a word. He just looked at me, or at least, I think he did. I couldn't see his eyes. Then he turned and walked. No greeting, no gesture, but something inside me said, "Follow him." So I did. We walked in silence. He didn't make a sound. His feet didn't crunch the snow. His cloak didn't rustle. The only sound was the rosary. Click, 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 and sometimes a whisper, a prayer, always Latin, always calm. The fear inside me didn't disappear, but it changed. It became something quieter, something reverent. The forest still felt strange, but not malevolent, more like sacred. I followed him deeper. The trees thickened, the snow lightened, and then I saw it. A cabin. It sat low between two hills, half buried in snow. Smoke rose from the chimney. Light glowed through a small window. He opened the door, walked in. I followed. Inside, it was warm. A fire crackled. A table sat in the center. A single chair. A small altar on the wall with a wooden crucifix above it. He didn't speak. He poured me a bowl of soup, set it on the table. I sat. I ate, slowly, gratefully. He sat across from me, eyes closed, still holding the rosary, whispering. The heat of the soup moved through me like grace. When I finished, he pointed to a corner with a cot and a thick quilt. I lay down. He stood, and finally, he spoke. Just 3 words. "You are not alone." I slept, deep, dreamless, until it wasn't dreamless anymore. I saw snow falling backward, bells ringing without hands, a church with no doors, and a girl walking through fire but not burning. I heard someone calling my name, not with sound, but with peace. And then, I woke up. The fire was out. The room was cold. The chair was empty. He was gone. I sat up. There was a rosary on the table. Not the one I carried in. This one was older, worn smooth with age. The crucifix looked hand-carved. I picked it up. Then I stepped outside. The sun had risen. The storm had passed. But the cabin, it was gone. No smoke, no door, no structure, just trees and snow, untouched, like nothing had ever been there. Chapter 2. The Silent Forest. Some silences don't come from the absence of sound, but from the weight of what watches behind it. When I stepped out of the cabin that morning, something inside me whispered that the rules of the world had changed. The sky was pale, washed in the weak light of winter. Snowflakes drifted gently from above. No longer a storm, but a quiet hush. The cold hit me first, not sharp or biting, but numbing, the kind of cold that feels like it's listening. And behind me, where the cabin had stood, was nothing. No smoke, no roof, no door, not even the shape of a foundation. Just snow, just trees, just silence. I turned in a slow circle, trying to find where I had come from. But it was like the path had erased itself. No footprints, no broken branches, no evidence that I, or he, had ever walked through these woods at all. If I hadn't still had the rosary in my coat pocket, I might have thought I dreamed it, but I could feel the smooth wooden beads beneath my glove, warm against the chill, real. Just like him, I took a few tentative steps forward, hoping my legs would remember what my mind didn't. But every direction looked the same. Trees, shadows, white. I tried not to panic. I'd gotten out once. I could do it again. Right. But even as I told myself that, something about the woods had shifted. They were no longer still. They were expectant, like a breath being held. I kept moving, step after step, boot sinking after boot sinking. My legs ached, but I didn't dare stop. Not yet. The trees here grew taller and closer, their trunks dark against the snow, bark peeling like old parchment. Every now and then, I thought I saw something move between them, a flicker of gray, a twist of light, but whenever I turned to look, it was gone. The wind had died completely, and that's when I realized there was no sound, not just quiet, but nothing. No birds, no cracking branches, not even the soft hiss of snow landing on snow. It was like the entire forest had stopped breathing. I kept walking. Time dissolved. I don't know how long I wandered. My phone was useless. My watch had fogged over. All I had was the rhythm of my feet, my breath, and the feeling that something was following me. It wasn't constant, just a subtle weight at my back, like a gaze. Several times I stopped and turned sharply. Nothing, just the press of trees and whiteness. But I knew, the way a child knows something is in the closet, the way animals know when to run. I wasn't alone. Eventually, the fatigue began to set in. My body was slowing down. My fingers were stiff, my mouth dry. I hadn't eaten since last night, hadn't had water, and now the forest was starting to play tricks. I saw a fence once, wooden and broken, but when I blinked, it was just branches. I saw a lantern light flickering ahead, but when I chased it, I ended up in a clearing filled only with stones. I kept going, because what else could I do? Until my foot hit something under the snow, and I stumbled hard. I landed on my hands and knees, snow seeping into my sleeves. I stayed there, eyes closed, breath ragged. I wanted to cry, or scream, or sleep, maybe all three. But then, I heard it. That sound again. Click, click, click. Rosary beads. My eyes snapped open. I turned my head slowly. And there he was, the old man, standing a few yards away, just beyond a patch of frost-covered birch trees. Same cloak, same stillness, same impossible silence. He was looking at me. I couldn't see his face, but I felt his gaze. Not heavy, not cold, just steady. He raised one hand, not to wave, just a slow motion. Come. I didn't hesitate. I stood up, legs shaking, and followed. We walked together through the trees. Just as before, he made no sound. His steps left no tracks. And the forest, as if in his presence, began to shift again. It didn't grow louder, but gentler, less hostile. The snow lightened, the air lost its edge. And once more, I heard him whispering, not to me, to someone else, to God. The Latin rolled off his tongue like breath. Sancta Maria, Mater Dei. or a pro nobis peccatoribus. The rosary clicked with each step, and I followed that rhythm like it was the only heartbeat left in the world. We reached a place that didn't look any different from the rest of the forest. But I knew it was different. The trees formed a wide circle, their trunks older than anything I'd seen before. In the center was a single tree, massive, gnarled, its bark twisted and silver with age. It felt sacred. The old man stopped at its base. He didn't speak, just looked at the ground. I followed his gaze. Half buried in snow and moss was a flat stone, weathered, cracked. I brushed it clear with my glove. There was writing, faded, but readable. He lived in prayer. He died in silence. Let the forest remember him. I stared at the words for a long time, then looked back at the old man. "You?" I asked, but he only looked at the stone, and then, once again, turned. He led me deeper still, and this time, the forest gave way to a small cabin, not the one from last night. This one was older, darker, half swallowed by ivy and snow, but smoke rose from its chimney. He opened the door. Inside, the warmth hit me like a memory. The scent of pine and old candles filled the space. There was a table, a single chair, a small painting of the Virgin Mary on the wall, her hands open in quiet welcome. He gestured for me to sit. I obeyed. He brought a bowl of soup. Simple, clear broth, herbs I didn't recognize. I drank, slowly. He sat across from me, his rosary still moving, his lips whispering prayers I couldn't translate. And for the first time, I felt calm. When the bowl was empty, he stood. He pointed to a small cot in the corner. I laid down without question. The blanket was thin, but somehow warm. My body relaxed, and before I drifted into sleep, I heard him say something. Soft, a voice like wind through stained glass. To help is to pray. I dreamed again, not strange visions this time. Just peace, a candle flickering in a dark room, a child's voice singing an old hymn, my mother's hands lighting a votive, whispering the same prayers the old man spoke. When I woke, the room was cold, the fire gone, the chair empty. He was gone. I sat up, heart sinking. On the table was the rosary. I reached out, fingers trembling. It was warm. Outside, the snow had stopped. The light was clearer, and for the first time, I saw a path, a real one, narrow, winding, but definite. I took one last look at the empty cabin, then placed the rosary around my neck and walked toward whatever waited beyond the trees. Chapter 3. The cabin in the snow. Some places are not built by hands, but by prayers whispered into the silence. I don't remember how long we walked. The old man led, and I followed, without question, without doubt. The forest no longer felt like a maze. It felt known, like the path had always been waiting. And the snow, which once swallowed every trail, now gently outlined the way ahead. I didn't speak, neither did he. There was no need. His presence carried a weight I couldn't explain, a mixture of gentleness and reverence. Like being in the back pew of a cathedral while a choir sings in a language you don't understand but still feel in your bones. The rosary beads in his hand clicked softly as he walked. a constant rhythm that felt older than the woods themselves. Click, whisper, click, silence. We came to a clearing I hadn't seen before. It was nestled in a low dip between hills, where the wind stilled and the snow seemed untouched by time. And there, as if placed carefully by grace itself, stood a small wooden cabin. It looked ancient, not run down or abandoned, just simple, humble. Its slanted roof was dusted with snow, and a curl of smoke rose from the crooked chimney. Warm light glowed faintly from behind foggy windows. The old man paused for a moment outside the door. He turned his head slightly, as if listening to something beyond human sound, then stepped inside. I followed, warmth wrapped around me like a memory. The inside of the cabin was dim but welcoming. Wooden walls, uneven but solid, a small hearth where the fire crackled, casting golden light across the floor. There was no furniture except a rough table, two mismatched chairs, and a wooden cot in the far corner. But what drew my eyes was the wall above the hearth. There, hung carefully as if they had always belonged, were three things: a simple crucifix, carved from dark wood, a well-worn rosary with beads smooth from use, and a small wooden shelf holding a candle and what looked like a missal. Its leather cracked with age. It wasn't just a room, it was a sanctuary. The old man didn't speak. He moved to the hearth, stoked the fire gently, then turned to a pot hanging above it. He ladled something, broth, maybe, into a clay bowl and placed it on the table. Then he pulled out the chair across from it, nodded once, and sat. I hesitated. Then I sat too. The soup was hot and smelled of thyme and something sweet, almost like cloves. I ate slowly, my hands shaking not from fear, but from exhaustion giving way to relief. He sat silently, fingers moving along the rosary, whispering prayers I couldn't hear over the fire's crackle, but I felt them, like a hum just beneath my skin. I didn't know what to say. I didn't even know if he expected anything. When I finished the soup, he reached forward, took the empty bowl, and placed it back by the hearth. Then, without a word, he pointed to the cot in the corner. I stood up, my body suddenly twice as heavy. The warmth of the fire, the fullness of the soup, the safety of this quiet cabin, it all wrapped around me like a lullaby. I made my way to the cot, lowered myself onto the straw mattress, and pulled the thick woolen blanket over my shoulders. The old man remained at the table, still praying. The last thing I saw before sleep took me was the rosary in his hand catching the firelight, its shadow dancing on the wall beside the cross. And then the dream came. It began with bells, deep, resonant, echoing through snow and silence. I was walking, barefoot somehow, through an open field of white. My footprints left no mark behind me. The sky above was gray, thick with unmoving clouds, but the bells rang clear, as if they came from nowhere. And everywhere, then, ahead of me, a shape emerged, a building, tall, narrow, Gothic, a church, old, abandoned, covered in vines that had frozen in place like silver fingers. The steeple was cracked, its cross tilted, one of the stained glass windows was broken, a jagged hole letting in the sound of wind. Yet the bells kept ringing. I stepped inside. The interior was massive, far bigger than it should have been from the outside. rows of pews stretched out, coated in frost. The altar was untouched, illuminated by the soft glow of candles that hadn't been lit in decades. There was no dust, only silence, and yet I wasn't alone. I felt it, a presence, not evil, not threatening, but weighty, like someone who had been waiting a long time to be seen. Then I heard it, a whisper, soft, female, echoing. Not everyone is allowed to see this. I turned toward the voice, but there was no one there, only the altar, and behind it, a great arched window through which snow fell but never landed. I walked toward it, drawn, and in that moment, I saw the rosary from the cabin, floating mid-air, each bead glowing faintly with light, each click of movement a heartbeat, and I realized it was praying for me. I woke with a gasp. The fire in the hearth had died to embers. The cabin was dark, but the warmth lingered. The old man was gone, the chair empty, the table cleared, but on the cot beside me was the same rosary from the dream. Still warm, still humming, I sat up slowly. Outside, snow tapped softly at the window. For a long time, I just sat there in the dimness, the rosary in my lap, my thoughts blurred and buzzing. What had I seen? Was it just a dream? Or had I been taken somewhere? I didn't know. All I knew was this: something was changing in me. A part of me I'd buried, the part that believed in something greater. In grace, in mystery, was beginning to stir again. And it started here, in this cabin, with this man, and with the prayer that kept echoing in my chest. Not everyone is allowed to see this, but I had, and I would never be the same. Chapter 4. The Prayer in the Silence. Sometimes the absence of something speaks louder than its presence ever could. I woke to stillness, not the kind of stillness that comes with peace. This was the kind that comes with endings. The fire had gone out. The warmth had slipped away during the night. The room was colder now, grayer, no light from the hearth, only the faint blue hue of dawn slipping in through the frost-covered window. I reached instinctively toward the chair where he always sat, empty, no coat, no rosary, no trace. "Hello," I said, my voice thin and unconvincing in the still air. No reply. I sat up slowly, the blanket sliding off my shoulders. My breath clouded in front of me. He was gone, and something in me already knew he wasn't coming back. I stood, pulled my coat tight, and opened the cabin door. The wind kissed my cheeks. Soft and cold, snow covered the clearing again. Fresh and undisturbed, no footprints, no walking stick marks, no sign of movement, not even my own from the night before. It was like we had never been there. I stepped outside, heart pounding. The sky above was pale, an overcast silver dome that made everything feel suspended. Even the trees looked like they were waiting. I walked a slow circle around the cabin, except there was no cabin. I turned to look behind me, to confirm what I had just exited, but it wasn't there. Just forest, just snow, a wide open patch of flattened white and a few scattered pine needles on a circle of bare, frozen ground. The place where it should have been, where I had slept, where he had prayed, was just gone. I backed away a few steps. then turned and ran toward where the door had been, my boots kicking up powder, my breath quick and ragged. Nothing. I reached out, only air. I knelt, touched the snow. Underneath was hard, compacted dirt, smooth as if it had been pressed down by weight and time, but not recently. More like a memory had rested here, a dream that had made a mark before vanishing. What was this? What had happened? Was I hallucinating? Still dreaming? I stood again, suddenly lightheaded. The rosary. My hand went instinctively to my coat pocket. It was there. I pulled it out. The same one. Wooden, hand-carved, the crucifix slightly chipped at the edges. The same pattern of wear, the same slight warmth, the one the old man had always held. I stared at it, my heart suddenly still. I hadn't put it in my pocket. He had, or someone had, and now it was mine. I don't know how long I stood there, holding that rosary. It felt heavy, not physically, but in meaning, in mystery. It wasn't just a string of beads anymore. It was a trail, a guide, a question. I whispered, "Why?" And the woods, as always, gave no answer. But something in me shifted. My fear began to dissolve, not disappear entirely, but soften. I wasn't lost. Not really. I had been led here, protected, cared for. That much I knew. By what, or by whom, I couldn't say, but the proof was in my hand. And in the way I suddenly knew, without knowing how, that the path out of the forest was just beyond the far edge of the clearing. A direction I hadn't tried before, one I didn't remember coming from, but it felt right. I slipped the rosary around my neck, tucked it beneath my coat, and began to walk. The trees closed behind me, but the silence was different now. Not hollow, not hostile. It felt like prayer. I don't remember how long I walked. Maybe hours, maybe less. The sky brightened slowly, then turned overcast again. The snowfall was steady but gentle, brushing across my cheeks like whispers. And though I couldn't see them, I felt them, the prayers, like footsteps behind me, like eyes watching, not to judge, but to keep watch. The wind moved through the trees in soft sighs. At one point, I stopped by a frozen stream and looked down. The surface was cloudy, opaque, but for a moment, just one, I thought I saw a reflection beside mine. His face, not smiling, just present. Then it was gone. I didn't cry. I didn't run. I just kept walking. Eventually, the forest began to change. The trees grew thinner, more light filtered through, the snow packed tighter underfoot. And then, far ahead, I saw the shimmer of a road. A real one, paved, salted, wet with thawed snow and tire tracks. I stepped out of the woods and onto the shoulder, and laughed, not loudly, but deeply, a sound that felt like sunlight. Cars passed by, none stopped. That was okay. I didn't need them to. I had made it out, somehow, and the forest had let me go. I stood there for a long time, looking back at the line of trees, the place where I had come from. But there was no cabin, no man, no signs, only the silence and the rosary around my neck, resting warm against my heart. I never found the clearing again. Later, when I tried to return with maps, GPS, even local guides, we never located it. The area didn't match what I remembered. Nothing felt right. One man told me there had once been a hermit who lived deep in the woods. Decades ago, a religious man, quiet, said to have died in a blizzard sometime in the early 70s. Body never found. Some say he was a priest. Others said he was just a man with deep faith and a deeper silence. I never saw a photo, but I didn't need to. I knew who he was, even if the world didn't. They say that when we are lost, heaven finds us first. I believe that now, because I had been lost, not just in the snow, but in grief, in doubt, in the silence after goodbye. And someone came for me, not with loud miracles or lightning, but with prayer and a rosary and the quiet that only faith can leave behind. Chapter 5. The Search. Some truths aren't meant to convince, they're meant to remain. It took me 3 days to tell anyone, not because I was afraid of what they'd think, though I was. Not because I didn't know what to say, though I didn't. It was because I wasn't ready to hear the silence that would follow. You know the kind, the polite tilt of the head, the softened voice, the pity behind the eyes, the way people smile when they think you've been through something too much. Like grief makes hallucination acceptable. Like faith, when spoken out loud, becomes a fragile thing they're afraid to touch. But I had to tell someone, because even if they didn't believe me, I needed to know I hadn't just imagined the whole thing. I needed to say the words aloud, to place the story into the world and see if it would echo. So I drove into the nearest town, still wearing the same coat, the same boots, the same rosary tucked beneath my collarbone. It was a small place, the kind with a post office and one diner, the kind where strangers stand out even when they try not to. I ordered black coffee and sat near the back, trying to gather the courage to speak. The waitress was kind. Her name tag said, Lena. She looked maybe 50, with kind eyes and a voice like folded wool. Rough out there? She asked. Yeah, I said. I was lost in the forest. She gave a small laugh, like it wasn't uncommon. People get turned around out there all the time. You're lucky you got out. I hesitated, and then I said it. Someone helped me. I told her, as much as I could. The storm, the car breaking down, the figure in the snow, the cabin, the soup, the silence, and the rosary. I didn't embellish, didn't add drama, just the facts. Strange as they were. When I finished, she was quiet. Then she poured me a second cup and said, You should talk to Father Harris. I blinked. Who? Our parish priest. He's been here forever. He might know what you're talking about. I met Father Harris that afternoon. He was in his 70s, small and wiry, with silver hair and a presence that filled a room without trying. He welcomed me into the rectory with a cup of tea and a chair by the fire. I told the story again. He listened without interruption, his eyes focused, his hands folded in his lap. When I finished, he said nothing for a long time. Then, very softly, he asked, May I see the rosary? I hesitated, then reached into my coat and placed it in his hands. His breath caught. He turned it over, fingers tracing each bead. Then he looked up at me, eyes shining with something I couldn't name. Where did you say you found this? In my coat, I said, after I woke up. The cabin was gone, but this was there. He nodded slowly. This belonged to Brother Mateo. The name meant nothing to me, but to Father Harris, it meant everything. Brother Mateo was a monk. He said, voice hushed, a Carmelite hermit. He lived in those woods 40, maybe 45 years ago. Built a small chapel himself, cleared a space in the forest, lived entirely in prayer. What happened to him? I asked. He went missing. One winter, there was a blizzard. They say he left the cabin to gather wood and never returned. No body was found, only his rosary, left behind in the chapel. He looked at it again. I never thought I'd see it again. We sat in silence. Then he said, we need to go back. It took 2 days to organize. I contacted the local sheriff's office, told them I wanted to revisit the place I'd been found. I omitted some of the details. I knew better than to lead with ghosts and saints. They agreed to send an officer with me. Standard protocol, they said, just to make sure I was okay. I asked Father Harris to come too. He didn't hesitate. That morning, we drove out together, me, the sheriff's deputy named Dan, and the priest. The snow had eased up. The sky was clear, but the woods were still thick with white. We parked just off the main road, near the spot where I had emerged that first day, and I led them in. It was harder than I expected. The trail I thought I remembered had changed. The trees looked different, or maybe it was my memory that had shifted. What felt like a straight path now twisted. The clearings were narrower. The sky seemed darker under the branches. We walked in silence, the three of us. Snow crunched underfoot. No birds sang. And then, after what felt like an hour of wandering, I stopped. This is it, I said. A circle of flattened snow. The same space, the same emptiness. Nothing had changed, except everything had. They looked around. No cabin, no chimney, no remnants of fire. Just earth and ice. Dan pulled out a notebook, wrote a few things down, then shrugged. Looks like a clearing, maybe used for camping once. He didn't say I was lying, but he didn't have to. Father Harris stepped to the center. He knelt, ran his fingers over the snow, and then closed his eyes. I watched him pray, not aloud, but with the kind of silence that holds the weight of generations. When he stood, he turned to me. This is holy ground, he said. We didn't find anything else. No artifacts, no wood beams, no footprints. But when I looked at Father Harris, I didn't feel foolish. He believed me, because he had known the man I met, and because some things don't leave marks on the world the way we expect them to. Some things move through it quietly, like grace, like the wind in the trees, like a rosary left in a coat pocket by hands no longer bound by time. On the way back, no one spoke. At one point, I pulled the rosary out again, held it between my fingers. Father Harris glanced over. That was his favorite. He said he carved it himself, prayed with it every day. I nodded, and for the first time, I allowed myself to believe the truth that had been whispering since that first night in the storm. It hadn't just been a dream, or a miracle, or a haunting. It had been an answer to a question I hadn't known I was asking. Back in town, I thanked both men. Dan smiled politely, drove off. Father Harris, before leaving, placed a hand on my shoulder. "You saw something most people never get to see," he said. "Something sacred." I nodded, unable to speak. Then he said, "The church calls it divine encounter. The world calls it coincidence. Call it what you will, but don't forget it." "I won't," I whispered, and I meant it, because some stories aren't meant to be proved, just lived. Chapter 6. The Old Photograph. Sometimes, the face you remember is one the world has already forgotten. A week passed. 7 quiet days since we returned from the woods with nothing but snow under our boots and a question too sacred to answer. I stayed in the village, rented a room above the post office with a view of the church tower. Every morning, I heard the bell ring at 7, a gentle, hollowed tone that reminded me of the dream, the one with the broken church, the falling snow, and the whisper. Not everyone is allowed to see this. I didn't tell anyone else what had happened in the forest. Not in full, not yet, but the story had begun to echo in small ways. The waitress, Lena, left a cup of tea on my table each morning without asking. The sheriff nodded every time he passed me on the street, eyes curious but no longer doubtful. And Father Harris, he kept in touch. Quietly, a hand on the shoulder after Mass, a few gentle words on Sunday, "You still have it," and my nod in reply. Always with the rosary tucked safely beneath my sweater. Then, one cold afternoon, he asked me to come by the rectory. "I want to show you something," he said, "something I think you've earned the right to see." The rectory was warm, with thick curtains and the scent of polished wood and candle wax. I'd been inside before, briefly, but never past the front parlor. This time, he led me down a hallway lined with portraits, past priests and bishops. Their eyes faded from time and dust. He stopped at a door near the end and took a key from around his neck. "I keep this locked," he said, not out of secrecy, out of reverence. He opened the door. Inside was a small study. Bookshelves bowed with age, a writing desk by the window, framed photographs on the wall, yellowed and curling at the corners. And there, at the center of the far wall, hung a single large image, framed in carved wood. I stepped closer and stopped. My breath caught. It was him. The photo was black and white, dated and worn, but the man in it was unmistakable. Same robes, same stillness, same eyes, calm, unreadable, like a lake in winter. He was standing outside a wooden chapel, hands folded around a rosary, snow at his feet. His beard was neater, his shoulders younger, but it was him, the one who led me through the forest, the one who never spoke, yet said everything. "My God," I whispered. Father Harris came to stand beside me. His name was Brother Mateo. He lived in the woods for over a decade, built a chapel by hand, spent his days in prayer, fed anyone who came, took in lost travelers, protected the vulnerable. I nodded slowly. That's exactly what he did for me. The priest's voice softened. Then he's still doing what he was called to do. He told me the rest. Brother Mateo had been born in Spain, joined the Carmelites in his early 20s, and moved to the US on mission work in the 1950s. He lived in the city for a time, teaching, preaching, but left it all behind in the late 60s. They say he heard a voice during adoration one evening. Father Harris explained that he was to go where no one would follow, that his prayers would be stronger in silence than in speech. He moved into the forest that same year and stayed. No phone, no letters, just occasional visits to town for salt and candles. Sometimes villagers brought him food. Sometimes they asked for prayers. He never asked for anything in return. Then, in 1973, the worst winter in 50 years hit. One morning, someone found the chapel door open, but he was gone. They searched for him. The priest continued. The villagers, police, even some friars from the city, for weeks. But nothing, no footprints, no sign, only his rosary left behind on the altar. And the strange thing was, the chapel itself collapsed not long after. Collapsed. He nodded. Fireplace cracked. Roof gave out. Some said it was coincidence. Others said it was because he wasn't there anymore. I stared at the photograph. He was trying to get back to someone. I whispered, or maybe, to help one last time. Father Harris didn't respond. He didn't have to. After a long silence, he turned toward the corner of the room. There was a small trunk there, worn leather, brass hinges. He opened it carefully and pulled out a stack of photographs. Most people don't know we have these. He said, only a few remain. This one. He handed me a smaller image, was taken by a boy who'd gotten lost in the woods in 1969. His parents swore he was gone for 2 days, but he turned up clean, fed, and calm as a dove. Said a quiet man gave him soup and read him stories from a black book. No one believed him, but he remembered. I looked at the photo. Brother Mateo again, this time standing beside a boy, one hand gently resting on his shoulder. I'm not the first, I murmured. No, Father Harris said, and maybe not the last. That night, I couldn't sleep. I sat by the window of my rented room, watching the snow fall under the streetlight, the rosary wrapped around my hand. What had I experienced? A ghost? A saint? Something in between? I thought back to that moment in the forest, when I was cold, afraid, sure I wouldn't make it. And then he appeared, silent, steady, with soup, and prayer, and a presence that still echoed inside me. In the days that followed, I stayed in the village. I helped Father Harris in the rectory library. I visited the elderly who remembered Mateo as a young man. I sat in the church some evenings, alone except for the flickering candles and the crucifix that had grown less strange to me than it once was. One old woman, Mrs. Donnelly, told me a story in her kitchen while peeling apples. He came to me once. She said, in the dark, after I lost my first child, I was sitting by the riverbank, thinking terrible thoughts, and there he was, sat beside me, didn't say a word, just prayed. She wiped her hands on her apron. I never saw him again, but I never forgot the peace. People believe what they need to believe. Some think I made it up. That trauma made me see things. That grief filled the forest with shadows shaped like saints. But I know what I saw. I know the warmth of the fire, the sound of beads in the dark, the way silence can feel like a hand in yours when you need it most. And I know that when I left that place, I wasn't just found, I was changed. They say Brother Mateo still walks the woods, that in the harshest winters, His rosary can be heard between the trees. That travelers who are honest and afraid and alone just might meet him. I believe that because once I was all three and he met me. Chapter 7. Faith Beyond the Snow. Faith doesn't always begin with belief. Sometimes it begins with being found. I used to laugh at people who believed in miracles. Not cruelly, just quietly, in the kind of way you laugh when you think you know better. I had learned to live with reason, to depend on patterns and facts and things that could be held in your hands. Faith, to me, was something soft, too soft for the world we lived in. But something changed in the snow, or rather, something in me changed, since the day I walked out of that forest, rosary around my neck. The wind brushing behind me like a prayer. I've never been the same. It started slowly. The first night back in the village, I sat up in bed with the rosary in my palm, not clutching it in fear, just holding it the way you'd hold a photograph of someone you missed. The beads were cool and smooth, shaped by hands that had once prayed for strangers like me. I didn't know the prayers, not all of them, but I whispered the few lines I could remember from childhood. Hail Mary, full of grace. I didn't ask for anything. I just thanked him for the cabin, for the warmth, for the silence, for the man who found me, for still being alive. In the mornings, I walked to the church, not always for Mass, though sometimes. Yes, sometimes I just sat in the pews, watching the way the light slid across the stained glass, listening to the faint creak of wood beneath old saints' statues, smelling the wax of candles lit by hands older than mine. And slowly, something grew inside me, not answers, but peace. A few weeks after Father Harris showed me the photo of Brother Mateo, I returned to the forest alone. It took time to find the spot again, but I knew it when I saw it. That wide clearing, the open sky above, the ring of pine trees standing like sentinels around the space where a cabin had once stood, and now only wind passed through. At the center of it all, one tree stood taller than the rest. The pine, old, massive, its trunk warped by time and weather, bark peeling gently along its base. That was where I stopped. I knelt there, the snow soaking through my jeans. I closed my eyes and prayed. It became a habit. Every few weeks, I'd return, sometimes with candles, sometimes with flowers, sometimes with nothing but the ache in my chest that only silence could hold. I never expected to see him again, and I never did, but I felt him, not like a ghost behind me, more like a memory in the branches, a presence that made the wind shift and the pine needles hum. I started calling it Rosary Hill, quietly, to myself, a name without formality, but with meaning. That hill didn't belong to me. It belonged to him, to the man who once walked its edges in prayer, long after his breath had left his body. After a few months, I began to write again, not for work, not for anyone else, just to remember. I started a blog. I didn't expect anyone to read it. The first post was simple. I was lost once, in the woods, in life, and I was found by a man who had no voice and no shadow. Just a rosary, and a fire, and a silence that felt like love. I wrote about the storm, about the cabin, about the soup, and about the prayer I heard between the trees. To my surprise, people read it, more than I expected. Some left comments, some sent emails, some just said, "I've never believed, but now, maybe." Others said they had seen him. Chu, a woman from Michigan, wrote, "I saw a man like this when I was 12. We were camping, and I wandered too far. He gave me warm water from a wooden bowl. I thought it was a dream. But your description, your man, he's the same." A man from Ireland said his grandfather spoke of the silent friar who saved him from freezing on a pilgrimage decades ago. Gave him a crucifix he never took off. Another woman described a stranger helping her push her broken-down car on a snowy road in Vermont. He disappeared before she could thank him. But she remembered the way he touched the hood before walking away. And she heard beads clicking as he went. I cried when I read that one, not because it proved anything, but because it connected everything. I wrote more. Each post was a thread, not doctrine, not theology, just witness, a voice in the wilderness saying, "I saw something, and I still don't understand it, but it changed me." More stories came in. People started calling it the Rosary Man. Some asked if he was an angel. Some said he was a ghost. Others said he was a symbol. I didn't argue. I didn't correct, because none of us really know. One spring morning, I brought a wooden cross to the pine tree on the hill. It was simple, made by hand, rough edges, no embellishments. I placed it at the base of the trunk, along with a fresh rosary I had made from olive wood beads. It wasn't a shrine, just gratitude, a marker, so anyone who wandered through might feel what I felt, might pause, might remember someone they once loved, or someone they once were. Father Harris visited the hill once. We didn't speak much. He lit a candle, placed it beside the cross, knelt, prayed, and as he stood, he said quietly, "This is holy ground." I smiled. I know. I live near here now, not far from the edge of the woods. I work part-time at the library. I still write, but the forest is always close. When the snow comes, I walk to the hill. Even now, sometimes, the trees creak in a way that makes my breath catch. Sometimes, the silence wraps around me like a voice without words. And I remember, people still write to me. Every few weeks, I get a letter from someone who's lost, not just in the woods, but in grief, in addiction, in regret, and they say, "I don't know why I'm telling you this, but I do, because some stories are like prayers. We don't always know what they're asking for. We just know we have to say them." They call it Rosary Hill now. The villagers, the travelers, even the maps. I didn't ask them to, but something sacred names itself, and it stays. Not long ago, I returned to the tree on the coldest night of the year. I brought no candle, no flowers, just myself, and I stood there in the snow, breathing in the silence, and I whispered the prayer, "Hail Mary, full of grace." The wind moved, the branches swayed, and for a moment, just a breath, I felt a warmth pass by. And the sound of beads, clicking once, twice, and gone. I once was lost in the snow, but I was not alone. A man with a rosary walked beside me. and every bead was a prayer that led me back to life. I no longer ask why, not because I have answers, but because I've learned that some questions are meant to be lived, not solved. The forest didn't give me a revelation. It gave me something quieter, the kind of grace that doesn't shout, but lingers like warmth in the bones. It gave me presence, holy, silent, and steady. He walked beside me when I couldn't see the road. He lit no lamp, spoke no words, promised no miracles, but his hands moved along the rosary, and with each bead, a prayer, and with each prayer, a step, and with each step, I returned to the world. People sometimes ask me if I believe he was an angel. I don't know. I only know that when I had nothing left, not faith, not direction, not even the will to keep walking, someone found me. Someone who had died long ago. Someone whose prayers never stopped. Someone whose rosary wasn't buried with him, but sent ahead, waiting for the next soul to be lost in the snow. Mine. I keep the rosary beside my bed now, not as a relic, not as proof, but as memory of silence, of warmth, of the man who prayed when I could not. Sometimes, late at night, I trace the beads with my fingertips, not to ask for anything, just to remember what it feels like to be carried. The snow will fall again. It always does, and I know others will find themselves where I once stood, in the dark, in the cold, wondering if there's anyone left who sees them. If they're lucky, they'll feel it too, that flicker of warmth, that hand reaching across the silence, that sound of a rosary, clicking gently between the trees. And maybe they'll remember my words, or maybe not, because this was never about the telling. It was about the finding, the being found, and the prayer that never ends. Luke chapter 1 verses 78 to 79. By the tender mercy of our God, the dawn will break upon us, to give light to those who sit in darkness and in the shadow of death, to guide our feet into the way of peace.